Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, politics, history, the culture, and anything else that strikes my fancy. This podcast can be found on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and YouTube, and eventually iHeartRadio. I am your host, Annette Bybee. The music that you hear at the beginning and the end of my podcast was written and performed by my brother, Paul Mashler. Thank you, Paul. Today's episode is a new experiment that I've decided to use as kind of the cornerstone of my new podcast, and it's called Civil Discourse. Now, the goal of Civil Discourse is to bring together people of opposing viewpoints in an effort to understand each other and demonstrate that we can disagree agreeably, not to argue, debate, or change minds. The reason that I decided to start Civil Discourse is that I see a dangerous divide in the country. It's being fueled by the media and social media. And I have no desire for another civil war. And I think we can do better than this. So I've decided that we're going to try and demonstrate that today. And then hopefully this will be a once a month thing. So I'm not going to pretend not to have an opinion, but since the goal of civil discourse is not to change minds, I'm going to try to do my best not to insert my opinion in the discussion, but rather to just facilitate the discussion. Don't worry, I'll be sharing my opinion on plenty of other episodes, pretty much every other episode. You'll know where I stand. But today, and on all my civil discourse episodes, I'm going to try and stay neutral. All right, so as you can see, if you're watching this, I record these for podcasts, but also I'm videotaping for YouTube. So if you're listening and you want to see what everybody looks like, go to YouTube/Annette Talks and find us. But as you can see, if you're watching, I have two guests today, two gentlemen, young gentlemen. I'm going to have them briefly introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk about their positions, which happen to be socialism or democratic socialism versus the free market. So and I've got on my left here Daniel, and on my right here Christian, and I did that on purpose, yes. Just for kicks.
Yeah.
All right. So Daniel, would you introduce yourself? I've never met you, and I don't know you at all, and so I'd just like to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, well, I just appreciate you having me on in that. It's nice to meet you, Christian.
You as well.
Yeah, so my name's Daniel Grosso. 28 years old. I live downtown Denver. I serve at a local restaurant there. I'm also a card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialists of America. And just a little spiel about democratic socialism. I'll start by saying what it's not. It's not simply more government. If it was, I wouldn't be advocating for huge cuts in military spending, the demilitarization of the police, and a stoppage of public investment in charter schools. What democratic socialism means, in my view, is that just as we're guaranteed civil liberties as human rights, we now have to start to guarantee economic liberties as human rights for all people. This includes the right to health care, housing, education, childcare, clean drinking water, food, and a clean and habitable planet. We supposedly live in the richest country on earth, and yet we still have veterans starving in the streets homeless. We still have over 500,000 Americans going bankrupt every year because they've committed the crime of getting cancer. And we still have oil companies polluting our air and water. It's ridiculous. What democratic socialism is a positive, affirmative vision of a future where the needs of society are met democratically. So right now, the richest among us have incredible control over our lives because there's no democratic mechanism to rein in their power. They're accountable to no one except a small number of shareholders and capitalists who are driven by the profit motive. And this profit motive directly leads to those homeless veterans I mentioned. It leads to those 500,000 bankruptcy. It leads to laced lead water and wildfires. So we need to reorganize society and economy to fit the needs of every one of us instead of the profit for a few. So to fight these injustices, we must have a democracy not just in our system of government, which we can debate how democratic our government actually is at the moment, but expand that democracy to the workplace and our communities. So we have to build and grow a working class movement to oppose the interests of the capitalist class, and we need millions of working class people to stand in solidarity and demand these economic rights, or we'll continue to have billionaires exploiting us and the most marginalized in our communities. So that's what democratic socialism is to me. I know that I mentioned a lot. I'm sure we'll go into all those points, but I'm excited to hear what Christian has to say about libertarianism.
All right. So you said you're 28?
Correct.
Right. So tell us something like you like to do in your free time.
Ooh, I love tabletop board games
Okay.
and card games, so I try to have like a game night once a month. Things like Dominion, which is deck building, just regular 52 pack of cards or things like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you're a millennial,
Mhm.
right? Okay. I always was trying to differentiate between the millennials and what is it, Gen Z or iGen?
Mhm.
And I think millennials. Well, what year were you born?
91.
Okay, yeah, you're millennial because I think the next generation is born in '95. I just read that recently. It's
Yeah.
someone made that determination somewhere. But anyway, all right. Thank you for sharing,
Mhm.
Christian. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then go ahead and tell us your position on the free market, basically.
Well, happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, we're
And
getting
I'm
pretty
grateful
close.
to be here. I'm grateful that we have all that we get to talk about this important subject. It's not going away.
Mhm.
It's only the discussion is only going to reach more homes. And I'm also grateful that how you explain yourself. I think the tone was very diplomatic, and that's something that we need
Yes.
always.
Well, I think that even if that you walk away from here and you decide you do want to try and change minds, because obviously that's our goal when we're out there in the political realm, but you can't do that by being strident or rude to people, because as soon as you start that, if someone's rude to you, are you going to keep listening?
No.
No, you shut right down, right? So that's something else that is the point of this. It's like, let's learn to like talk and share and explain and show the other person that we care about them, because otherwise then I'm done. As soon as someone's rude to me
Yeah.
or calls me a name or ad hominem attacks, I'm done. Or I just go on the defensive too, and then it goes nowhere. So this way, at least we can talk and listen, and that goes a lot further than arguing, I think.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, I interrupted you.
Fine.
Christian.
Well, Benjamin Franklin once said that you attract more flies with honey than with vinegar,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
That's the way I try to live my life. Like, so my name is Christian, and I'm a graduate of the University of Denver. I now work as a computer programmer. I love it, and one interesting thing about me is I know 5 languages.
Wow. Can you speak them all, or just...
Well, I count the computer languages.
Oh, okay. All right.
So there's English, Spanish, JavaScript, SQL, and C Sharp.
Oh, all right. And are you a millennial as well, just out of curiosity?
I would count it as yes, but I also think they're kind of arbitrary
Yeah.
distinctions made by people who do marketing,
Yeah.
to do marketing segmentation.
Well,
Because there are
I'm-
millennials that have millennials, if you think about it, and Gen Z that are having Gen Z.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it is. Well, the only reason I even bring it up is that in a few weeks I'm going to be doing an episode on teaching resilience to our children, and so we can avoid some of the snowflake stuff that's going on. And this is kind of a part of that. Like, we should be able to go to college and freely talk, right, and have free speech. And so the reason I even bring it up is they say it's not the millennials that are having these issues. And a lot of us make that mistake. It's the Gen Z or the iGen, which are the people that were born in '95. And so there's some reasons behind it, and I'll get into it in a few weeks if you will listen. But so that's why I ask, because I'm always kind of curious. So anyway, tell us your position on
Yes.
the free market.
So I studied political science, and I also studied computer programming. I've studied economics, but I'm not a professional economist by trade. So I wanted to talk about the philosophical and the ethical underpinnings for the free market. I like stories. So let's start off with a thought experiment. Let's say that you, Annette, sometimes sleepwalk at night.
All right.
I hope this is not the case, but
Yeah.
sometimes you do things that are unethical, and sometimes you do things that would be considered, good or bad things when you sleepwalk. Would that be considered morally good or morally for the bad? Neither, because you don't have a choice in the matter. And that's the thing, when we introduce coercion into humanitarian aid, we remove that. You see, morality cannot be separated from volition, which means choice. That's why I'm in favor of the free market, where people can interact freely and make that exchange.
All right. So basically, you're saying doing things without government guidance or requiring you to do it, basically. So I have a question for both of you.
Yeah.
What is your end goal for each of your beliefs? Like, what is it that you would like to see as a result of democratic socialism or the free market? Like, why do you believe that? What would you like to see as an end result of that? Let's start with you, Daniel.
Sure. So I have a suspicion that we share some of the same end goals. We probably just differ on how to get there.
That's exactly why I brought that up.
Exactly. So the end goals for me would be to have every American and non-American, non-citizen within our borders have access to health care that is free at the point of service. I believe that every human is entitled to housing as a human right, food as a human right, clean water, and a clean and habitable planet for themselves and the next generation. I think one of the differences I might have with Christian would be that I don't think the free market has the proper incentives and principles to bring that about, because it's based more on the profit motive. So things like large corporations, I think it'd be better under a democratic socialist vision, right, to have workers on the board of directors, and other things like where the corporation would have to put some stock into a collective fund that is owned by the workers so that they would have more say in the direction of the company. So I want democratic control not just in our government but in our workplaces and our communities, because who's going to vote to put an oil well 500 feet from their child's school, you know? If we had more input from the actual communities where they could vote and decide on these things instead of just a huge corporation coming in and plopping it down, I think that would be better.
So it sounds like you want people to have health care, housing, food, clean water, clean environment. So that's like your end goal, is you want everyone to have those things.
Yes. And to have them, we actually need to oppose capitalism.
Well, let's stick with right now the end result as opposed to how to get there. Christian, what is your end result goal here for the free market?
Well, at the end of the day, we have to ask, what is the purpose of our life? I mean, what is our highest purpose? And after studying it philosophically, each individual's purpose is to find their bliss, and to create a society where you can find that free of coercion, particularly from the government or from, sometimes criminal elements, because those are the two things are the biggest threats to our individual rights, which is a way of pursuing that individual freedom. For example, Daniel mentioned the over-militarization of the police. I could not agree with that more. There was this case where these people had this illegal gambling. It was probably like a raffle, and they used a SWAT team to bust in.
Yep.
Oh, right.
And you probably heard of this case. Awful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, raffle is not my thing, but some people really enjoy that.
So
Some
it sounds like what you're saying is you're more concerned with people having the liberty to live the way they want to live, as opposed to everyone having stuff, having basic shelter, food, clothing, and everything provided. It sounds like that's where you differ.
Well, I also don't think that you can have those liberties if you don't have the economic basic rights that we all need. So it's interesting to me when, and not that you just said this, but some people talk about how, well, we need a free market so you can make your decisions, but if you're starving on the street homeless, you can't make the best decision about your future. So if we guaranteed housing, they would have more of a floor for them to actually make decisions about their life that were affirmative, positive, and were free from coercion. You can't make the choice to pursue a degree at a higher university if you come from a family that's maybe extremely poor, and you grew up without, those extra study guides, or you had to get a job when you were in high school because you maybe were part of a single parent family and you needed to make ends meet. So I definitely am in favor, obviously, of civil liberties like freedom of speech and assembly and democratic voting, but I don't think that those things happen without, having a full belly.
All right. Do you have any questions? You guys have questions for each other about where these ideas come from? Well, let me go ahead and do that.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel, do you come from a background of, are your parents pro-socialism?
No.
Or no? What was your upbringing like?
I had the most comfortable upbringing you could have in America. I was upper middle or just upper class. My father was a physician who made a ton of money. And I never had to worry about where my next meal was coming from. I always knew I'd have a house. I went to good private middle school, then a good public high school. I have no college debt because my father paid for it, and he never asked me to pay him back. And so I would guess that I'm similar to a lot of the people who might listen to this, or a lot of my compatriots in downtown Denver. I'm a downwardly mobile millennial. My standard of living is probably going to be worse than my father's through no fault of my own or anybody else's.
So why do you think you're downwardly mobile? Why do you call yourself that?
Well, because I don't have health care. I get paid $8 an hour plus tips, or if I host where I don't get tips, I get paid like $14.50 an hour, which, the minimum wage federally is $7.25. In Colorado, it's $11.10, but that hasn't increased with inflation at all. Every sign points to my generation having a higher rate of suicide. They have a lower standard of living, and they have one of the biggies, a lower life expectancy. So, and also, the climate crisis is upon us, which will exacerbate all the other things. There's going to be more immigration, the wildfires in California, water shortages in Colorado. Not that I pretend to be an expert on the water situation in Colorado, but...
So where did you, since your parents are obviously, you're saying they're not socialist, and you kind of grew up in a privileged life, where did your ideas come from that sort of took you in this direction of feeling like socialism is the answer?
I looked to the material realities of the world around me, how we in America don't have free at the point of service healthcare, but other countries do. But hey, what gives? Like, America's the richest, right? And we're, some people say the freest, but we're at least one of the most free countries in the world, right? So if we're both of those things, but we don't have the freedom to quit our job because, well, I need health care. My wife, not my wife, but my wife is pregnant, and we need that health care so that she can pay for the ability to go to the hospital and have a baby. I don't have the freedom to actually decide I want to do a different job. It's things like that have brought me to...
Because healthcare is tied to employment right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Christian, where did you come across your view on the free market? Was it something that your parents sort of instilled in you, or something that you just decided over time? I'm wondering if either one of you also has like a mentor or someone that kind of inspired you in your viewpoints.
Well, it's an interesting story. I was living in this home. Well, I was renting this home in Murray, Utah, and it's not a very beautiful home, but it meant a lot to me because I built memories there. I had good friends there, and then one day, the government decided to use eminent domain to tear down that home and kick us out. Now, normally I would have understood if they had built like a road or if they built like a school, but the school board actually built a bus depot there. And then they built some corner cushy offices for the school board. And this is what made me understand that any government with the power to give you everything has the power to take everything away. It was one of the worst events of my life. And when I talked to some of the elected officials and what their rationale was behind it, they said things like, oh, we'll just explain to you and make you feel better about it. And they said it was for the public good. Right now, I'm really down on that idea of the public good, because what it means to me is some people's interests are more important than other people's interests. And woe be to you if you happen to be on the losing end, on the bad end, short end of that stick. Usually, it's the majority's interest against the minority. Which, if you're in the majority, that's great. But doesn't your happiness matter just as much as everyone else's? Why do they put interests at each other's? And I realized that, in a free market, nobody would have been forced to make that transaction. We could have decided what we wanted. And maybe I'd still be living there a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do either one of you have a mentor or someone that's inspired you, or someone that you kind of look up to as that kind of gave you some of the ideas that you had, or inspired you to look further into these ideas?
Well, I mean, the big one I think a lot of people my age would say, Bernie Sanders. His presence on the national stage finally gave me the ideas and the belief and the conviction to say, we all know that something's wrong in this country. So what is it? And through more study and thinking, I came to agree with his position that the corporate interest is opposed to the public interest. And I do, I resonate with your story. I do think that, seizing property based on public domain is a huge issue. For example, and we don't need to talk about them, but, Trump wants to build the wall, right? But then they're trying to seize private property on the border to do that. I think it's dumb for a lot of reasons, but seizing, and even in socialism, there's a distinction between private property and personal property. So if you have housing as a human right, or strong eviction legislation that you can't get evicted unless you've really done something horrible or something like that, I think that's compatible with democratic socialism, as well as the fact that if they do need to build a bus depot or something, the public good could be everybody getting in on the discussion, including you, and hearing your side of the story instead of the government coming in and just taking it. Like I said, socialism isn't just more and more government, right? It's democratic socialism is democracy everywhere in our life.
All right, thank you. So I want to ask you all a really important question, both of you. I want you to think about this. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Christian?
I think it's okay, but I have to admit that even for this podcast, that's pretty controversial.
It is, I know. But so are you saying yes? I don't want you to shilly-shally on this. Yes or no, pineapple on pizza?
It just depends on what mood I'm feeling, and I know I'm waffling on the situation.
Yeah, you are waffling.
But right now, if you were to say, Christian, we're going to order some pizza, I'd be like, no.
No. So right now you would say no.
Right now I would say no. What might change? No, I'm not in a pineapple mood.
We don't really like that answer, but all right, Daniel.
I am a strong pineapple proponent. In fact, if you don't want pineapple on your pizza, we will force you to have pineapple. No,
that's funny.
Pineapple for all.
Yeah, pineapple for all.
Or I think Christian prefers we get to choose.
Well, maybe we can do half and half,
Okay,
right?
right.
Half on and...
Yeah, but the juices, get over to the other side.
Externalities.
Yeah. It's funny because I posted that on Facebook once, and people really do line up on one side or the other, and it's funny because it's like people feel strongly about it. And I was joking that if there was, I don't think the Civil War is going to be over like political stuff. It's going to be over that pineapple versus.
They have stronger convictions about pineapple than they do about
you know what? Actually,
the economy.
That's true, and that's sad.
Yeah,
It is true. So you guys are both political activists, right?
Yes,
So you're both walking your walk, and you're not just talking your talk. So, from what we've talked about today, was there anything, Christian, did you hear anything from Daniel that resonated with you, or that you agreed with, or admired his position in some way?
Well, He did mention the demilitarization of the police, which I feel strongly about. He mentioned his opposition to the wall, which I am also strongly opposed to. And it's interesting thing how I became a citizen. I was actually born in Provo. That's it. And that's what gives me my right to live in the United States.
I think you two would probably agree on some of the immigration stuff. I'm just guessing.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, probably.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, as I'm blessed, I'm lucky enough to live where I want, and I've always felt that so long as you're not menacing anyone else, that you should be able to choose where you live. If the landlord wants to rent it to you, or if the homeowner wants to sell the home to you, that should be the only thing taken into consideration.
All right, thank you. Daniel, you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I do think we agree on a lot of different points. We probably agree on the decriminalization, at the very least, of all drugs as well. And the demilitarization of the police, the overreach of government in certain areas. And I think what really resonated with me, what Christian said was, the personal story, right? This is a very important organizing tactic that, and not that it was a tactic, but an organizing principle that your story of self, right? Like nobody can argue, well, Christian, you really didn't get your home taken away. No, that was horrible, I'm sure, a very traumatic event, and I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. And in the same way, I feel like I came to my belief because I saw how privileged I was, and I knew that I'm not special, I wasn't special, and I didn't deserve necessarily all these things. So does that mean that I should have, my quote-unquote free college education taken away? Does that mean I should have my nice home taken away? Does that mean I should have the health care that helped my family when I was younger taken away? No. What it means is maybe everybody else should have a slice of that pie too. One of the big things in my life that really, looking back, led me to this belief that healthcare is a human right is my mother was diagnosed with cancer when I was 12, and she passed away when I was 15. And in that interim, in 3 years, she had the best health care that money could buy. Because my father was a physician, he had the money, and he had good health care. And when I think back to that and all the care she had, the home care, the medication, the comfort care, I realized that a poor 12-year-old's mother deserves that same level of care too. So I would be interested to hear, as a question to Christian, like, if we can focus in on one issue, because I think it's the biggest issue in our time right now. Everybody's talking about it. Medicare for all.
No.
Healthcare is a human right, or is there a glide path? Like, what do you believe on that as a libertarian?
Okay. Well, that is a really great question. I've worked for Medicare in the past, so I'm intimately familiar with insurance. Working there for years, I realized that insurance isn't for everyone. Some people, they find it very useful. Other people, they find it this constantly shifting labyrinth.
Yeah.
And as as the government policy is, it nudges us towards that, pigeonholes us in that one option. Well, I'm more for an option that let a million different flowers bloom. There's so many different ways for people to obtain health care and those vehicles. But if the government continues saying this is the option and this is the only way, we're missing out on what economists would call versus the seen versus the unseen. I don't have an answer for your life. I don't have an answer for your life or what's best for you. But I believe that everyone has that capacity and the sentience to find their bliss and what's best for them.
So healthcare, basically a free market, because right now we really don't have a free market for healthcare. The government pays for a lot of it. But what you're saying is that if there was more of a free market, there would be other options that would pop up that people could partake of. So I'm like trying really hard. I'm like all these thoughts in mind. I'm like, I'm not going to inject it. I'm not going to inject it. But I think that most Americans can agree that the healthcare system is definitely broken and that it is unfair that some people have access to a whole lot more than other people. So I think that everyone can agree that we would like to see everyone have the at least adequate health care, so that no one should have to go into bankruptcy or whatever. I heard recently a story of someone who was working on a nonprofit and she got cancer and she ended up stealing money from the nonprofit to pay for her medical bills. and she was convicted and went to prison and everything. And so obviously she shouldn't have stolen, but the fact that she would be that desperate tells you, yeah, that's a problem. And so I think we can all agree that there is a problem there, and that everyone should have health care in some way. I think it's just a question of which way we think is the best way to get there. So I'm going to wrap it up right now while we're all still talking to each other. Right. And you guys have been great, and I want to give my listeners the opportunity to get to know you better. So what's a good place to find, Daniel, where's a good place for people to find you and interact with you or follow you?
I only have personal social media currently, but on Twitter I think my handle is unique like you, YOU, or it might be dgrosso17. But what I would really urge people to do is get involved. The DSA has a strong membership in Denver and all over the country. I would urge you to look up your local chapter. There is something for you in every DSA chapter. They have eco-socialism, they have a labor committee, they have a healthcare committee, they have immigration working groups, they have socialist feminist reading groups where you just read interesting books and yell at people over tea. like
what?
It's
They're not civil?
Yeah, no, sometimes I agree that we need to be civil, but I think sometimes it's good to let the beast out a little bit and know that at the end of the day, you might yell at each other a little bit. It's like family, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I yell at my family, doesn't mean we don't love each other.
Yeah, you know what? I don't have a problem with that either. If you both go into it respecting each other, and if you have that what's the word? That habit, or where you know that if you're talking to each other, you're gonna get into it, you're gonna get heated, but you have certain rules, like we're not gonna call each other names, we're not gonna get personal with each other.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Unfortunately, we just don't see a lot of it. So I wouldn't mind trying that sometime. Not quite as civil discourse, maybe, where people get into it, but in a rational, logical, respectful way.
And I think small media like your podcast and other podcasts is a great forum for it, because the media infrastructure in our country is just horrendous.
It is. I think we all agree on that. It's like they want us to fight.
Yes.
And so they are picking sides, and they are bombarding us constantly with, we want you to be outraged, basically. It's a constant, because that's how people, there's something in our brains that enjoys that and keeps tuning into it.
And you get more clicks, which equals more profit.
Right.
If it's, And there's polls done that Medicare for All has a 70% approval rating across all demographics, Democrats and Republicans. Something like almost 90% of Democrats, and then 54% of Republicans, and I don't know about independents. I'm an independent, actually. And then you go on CNN.com or wherever else, and it seems like nobody can agree. But we all agree on a lot of things.
I think there would be a lot more agreeing in person.
Quick question, at these feminist reading groups, the yelling, do they bring up pineapple pizza? Is that just out of the...
You know what? I shouldn't speak too much about the... I've actually never been to one of their meetings, so sorry if you're a DSA member you're listening. I haven't actually been to one of those, but I don't think they bring that up. No.
Yeah,
it's too hot.
Yeah, it's too hot a topic.
It is too hot. So, Christian, where can people find you?
Well, like I said, on Facebook, just Christian Rodier. But I agree with him that the best way is to get involved. For example, the Colorado Immigrants' Rights Coalition, which we have a mutual friend that works there. That's a wonderful way to get involved if you feel strongly. Talk about over policing. That's in the immigrant community. That's a serious issue. Also, another important economic issue. Also, if you want to volunteer with me at Americans for Prosperity, we can do both or one or the other.
All right, awesome. So, get out there and do stuff, people. Don't just, if you're going to live in this country and you want to enjoy what we have and change it and make it better in whatever way you think is better, you've got to get out there and do something about it. And sitting on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, it's great. I do a lot of it, but you've also got to get out there and actually do stuff, be active. So I appreciate you guys both coming out, and I may try and have you again sometime. I'm sure we can
Yeah.
have some other
Yeah.
topics that we can disagree on. And you guys have been great. And if you're watching or listening and you think, oh, I really want to be on there because I feel really strongly about this, or I know someone that would be perfect for this, send me an email at annette@annettetalks.com. Or if you have topic ideas, I'm thinking I would like to bring in a pro and anti-Trumper. I think that would be really interesting because people just seem to really take one side or another on this guy, like it's a total love-hate thing, and there aren't many people in the middle. So if you know someone like that on either side, let me know or have them contact me. Or anything else you want to say about this episode or anything else, go to AnnetteTalks.com, subscribe, go to Facebook, Annette Talks, YouTube, Annette Talks, basically Annette Talks everywhere. So just find me at one of those places. Thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness.
There you go.